be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. I was never going to be a cowboy. It was the horse thing. You ever seen a horse? It's just way too big. What's that about? My grandpa had a horse on his farm when I was a little kid. I never wanted to ride it. My own dad had a horse when he was a kid. Sometimes I wonder if he's my real dad. My wife had a horse when she was a kid. Even my daughter used to love riding horses at a special program for disabled kids. Not me. Never wanted to ride. No, sir, thank you very much. So it's kind of ironic that when my wife and I went on a church retreat before our kids were born, I was 23 years old. Guess what the activity was one afternoon? Horse riding. I think the guides could tell about me and horses. They picked a horse named Ginger out for me to ride. Now, I'm not saying Ginger was washed up, but I could sit on her back and my feet pretty much touched the ground. We got out into the scrub country of Wisconsin on this ride. We were living in the Midwest at the time. Unfortunately, it was hay fever season, and I had it really bad back then. So I started sneezing and coughing and wheezing, and then Ginger kept stopping to wheeze and cough like this. I'm not making this up. This was a pathetic sight. My wife was afraid she was going to have to call an ambulance. I thought they would just shoot us both and be done with it. Which at that moment I would have welcomed. So I'm telling you, I am no horseman. But I still have to give you some advice today about which horse to put your money on. It's about Jesus, of course. In the New Testament, Jesus rides two different horses. And I think we really need to pick one or the other. In the last book of the New Testament, the book of Revelation, Jesus rides a war horse. And he is a violent warrior. He destroys his enemies with his bloody sword, and then the vultures come and feed on their flesh. The radical nonviolence of Jesus of Nazareth falls away and then is replaced by the kind of violence normal in human civilization. In this vision of Jesus on the war horse, God cleans up history with what we might call divine ethnic cleansing. And there are hints of this vision, even in the Gospels, when Jesus gives his speeches about the end times. Now, a whole lot of New Testament scholars believe that these end time speeches, like the one we heard today from the 21st chapter of Luke's Gospel, were not actually the words of Jesus. The words comes apparently from a time later in the first century, after the Romans destroyed the temple, decades after the life of Jesus. And then these gospel writers put the words into the mouth of Jesus. But whether you buy that argument or not, it is true that the picture of Jesus on the war horse is still there in the New Testament. And Christians past and present have taken it on. Sometimes the idea of warrior Jesus convinces Christians to help Jesus out with their own violence and warfare. Think of crusades, past and present. And that's the danger. If you follow a violent Jesus, you'll be more ready to use violence yourself. Now, I don't know much about horses, but I believe that is the wrong steed for Jesus to ride. There is another one. Remember Palm Sunday. Jesus enters Jerusalem at the time of the Passover. Passover is the time the Jews think about God rescuing them from slavery in Egypt. In first century Jerusalem, Passover could be a very volatile time. what with Rome oppressing the nation the way Egypt had done long before. Jesus comes into that holiest of cities, and what is he riding? A donkey, a colt, a gentle pony. This is pointed satire by Jesus. This is street theater. He's making a point about war horses and nonviolence. Instead of a war horse, he comes into the city on a donkey. Instead of swords, his followers lift up palm branches. Instead of war, he comes offering peace and nonviolence. So there is a choice in the New Testament. We are given multiple pictures of Jesus. Which ones will we live by? I think it's an important question. Do we choose warrior Jesus or peaceful Jesus? Now, last week in the Kid Stuff puppet show, my French-Canadian priest friend, Father Loon, encouraged the kids to follow Jesus. Kid Stuff is fun, but I have a suspicion that the adults like Father Loon a lot more than the kids do. But our understanding of Jesus should go past what we got as little kids in Sunday school. When you grow up, you need a grown-up faith and understanding. It is a grown-up thing to see that there are differing visions of Jesus in the Christian church and even in the New Testament itself. We need to use our best intellectual tools to sift through and decide which is the authentic Jesus. I also think we need to use our hearts in that process. So when Father Loon tells us to follow Jesus, we need to make sure we're following the authentic Jesus. And that takes some intellectual work on our part. It's important to choose which image of Jesus and of his God we will honor. Do I choose a violent God, a violent Christ on a war horse? Or does the compassionate God and the peaceful Christ resonate more fully with me? Lots of Christians bet on both horses. They say the first coming of Christ was in peace, yes, but the second coming of Christ will be in war. Well, that doesn't work for me. There is that verse in the New Testament, letter to the Hebrews, that says Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And whatever else those words may mean, I think they talk about God's nature being consistent. And I'm putting my money on love and peace. You see, war and violence seem very human to me. Love and peace seem like they must come from above, from God. I think our image of God matters. I think we become like the Jesus we follow. I think we have to pick the right horse. So I bet on the donkey of Palm Sunday. The first coming of Christ was in peace and love, as we celebrate every Christmas season. I'm also betting that the second coming of Christ will turn out to be all about peace and love. I could be wrong, I know that. But warrior Jesus is not the one I will follow. I place my bet on the Jesus who rode the donkey. I give my allegiance to the Jesus who gave the Sermon on the Mount. I give my heart to the Jesus who practices what he preaches, yesterday, today, and forever. Amen.